Check your thermostat right now. Maybe it says 68 degrees, maybe 72. You said it once and forgot about it. But for over 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors faced the same problem every winter. And they had no thermostat, no insulation, no walls, just their hands, animal bones, and a cold so brutal it would kill a modern human in hours. So how did they not just survive, but thrive? The answer is not what you think, and it will permanently change how you look at your own home. Let's start with what the cold actually felt like. We're talking negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit on the Eurasian steppe. Not the cold you feel walking to your car. The kind of cold where exposed skin begins to die within minutes, where breathing hurts, where the wind doesn't just chill you, it hunts you. A modern human dropped into an ice age winter without preparation would likely be dead before sunrise. The popular image is always the same. Shivering cave people hunched around a small fire, barely making it through the night. But archaeology tells a completely different story, a story of engineers. Here is the first thing archaeology got wrong about your ancestors. They mostly didn't live in caves. At Kostroma in Russia, dating back 800,000 years, researchers found circular depressions, up to 8 feet deep, 12 feet across. These weren't natural formations. Tool marks in the soil prove they were deliberately excavated to those exact depths. Why? Because at 6 to 8 feet below the surface, the ground temperature stays 20 to 30 degrees warmer than the air above. Your ancestors didn't fight the cold, they went below it. But the real sophistication came later. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, 26,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered winter shelters with walls built from multiple layers, each one serving a precise thermal function. Innermost, animal hide, fur facing inward, trapping warm air against bodies. Outside that, dried grass and moss, wicking moisture away. Outermost, woven mats of reed and bark, wind-resistant but breathable enough to let moisture escape before it could freeze and destroy the structure from within. This wasn't primitive guesswork. This was deliberate, layered thermal engineering, the exact same principle behind the insulation in your walls today. Modern construction uses vapor barriers, insulating foam, and weatherproofing. Your Ice Age ancestors used hide, moss, and bark. The materials were different. The physics were identical. Now here's where it gets extraordinary. In Ukraine and Russia, at sites like Mezhirish and Kostenki, researchers discovered something that stopped archaeologists cold the first time they saw it. Houses. Not caves, not windbreaks. Actual engineered buildings, built entirely from the bones of woolly mammoths. Picture this. Mammoth skulls, each weighing over 200 pounds, used as foundation blocks. Curved tusks arranged into dome-shaped frameworks. Hundreds of smaller bones filling the gaps, providing structural support. The whole structure covered in layers of stitched mammoth hide, thick enough to block wind, shaped precisely enough to shed snow. That is not survival instinct, that is architecture. And experimental reconstructions of these houses have confirmed what the archaeology suggested. A properly built mammoth-bone house could maintain interior temperatures 40 to 50 degrees warmer than the outside air, using only modest fires. Modern Arctic shelters with industrial insulation and electric heating often perform no better. Let that sink in. Stone Age builders, using only bones, hide, and stone tools, matched the thermal performance of modern Arctic engineering, but none of this worked without fire. And fire wasn't just warmth, it was the entire operating system of Ice Age winter life. The heating systems inside mammoth bone houses were sophisticated by any standard. A central hearth provided primary heat. Smaller secondary hearths were positioned around the perimeter, creating warm zones for specific tasks. Food preparation here, tool making there, infants and elderly nearest to the warmest spots. The layout wasn't random, it was planned. In the treeless steppe, wood was not always available, so your ancestors developed an alternative fuel system. Mammoth dung, dried, and prepared. Bone, processed to maximize burn efficiency. Chemical analysis of hearth residues shows these fuels were deliberately treated, not just thrown on a fire, but engineered for specific heat outputs. They were not burning whatever they could find. They were managing fuel like a resource. And then there was ventilation. This is where modern Arctic engineers are genuinely impressed. Without proper airflow, moisture from breathing and cooking builds up inside any enclosed shelter. In sub-zero temperatures, that moisture freezes. The structure fails from the inside. Archaeological evidence at Kostenki shows carefully designed airflow systems. Small openings near ground level pulled in fresh air. Larger openings near the apex allowed warm, moisture-laden air to escape. Now here's the part most documentaries skip entirely. What happened inside these shelters after the sun went down? For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors went to bed at sunset and woke before dawn. But they didn't sleep the way you sleep. They slept in 2 phases. 4 hours, then a wakeful period of 1 to 2 hours, then 4 more hours until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. This was the default human sleep pattern, documented in historical records across dozens of cultures, and confirmed in a 1992 experiment by psychiatrist Thomas Weir, who found that when modern humans are removed from all artificial light for a month, every single participant automatically returns to this same 2-phase pattern. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years studying the Yuhuansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, one of the last groups on Earth still living close to the original human pattern. She found that nighttime conversation was categorically different from daytime conversation. During the day, 80% of talk was practical, logistics, hunting, resources. But at night around the fire, 81% of conversation was stories. The campfire was the original theater, the original classroom, the famous Venus figurines found at Paleolithic sites. Most were discovered in winter shelter contexts. The cave paintings associated with this period, many were created during the long months of winter confinement. The art that defined our species wasn't made in the warmth of summer. It was made by firelight in bone houses while the steppe outside was locked in ice. Building a mammoth bone house took 2 to 3 weeks of intensive work by 8 to 10 adults, which means construction had to begin in late summer or early autumn, well before conditions made outdoor work impossible. Analysis of tool wear and seasonal indicators confirms this. These weren't reactive builders. They were planners, with seasonal calendars running in their heads. Food storage was equally engineered. In permafrost regions, underground chambers connected to winter shelters by short tunnels served as natural refrigerators, keeping meat frozen and accessible throughout winter, even during the worst storms. Clothing worked on the same composite principle as the shelters. Multiple layers of different animal hides, each selected for a specific thermal property. Wolf fur, fox. Arctic hare, the innermost layer trapped warm air. The outer layer shed wind and moisture. The same physics as a modern winter jacket, developed independently from necessity, 25,000 years before Gore-Tex existed. And when the shelter was damaged, which was often, it was repaired immediately. Archaeological evidence shows ongoing maintenance throughout winter seasons. Broken bones replaced, hide coverings patched, insulation refreshed. This wasn't a structure they built and hoped for the best. It was a living system they managed continuously. At the end of the Ice Age, as climates warmed and forests expanded, this entire knowledge system was abandoned. Not lost to catastrophe, just gradually made unnecessary. Modern Arctic engineers studying Paleolithic shelter remains have been genuinely surprised. Military Arctic training programs now teach shelter building methods derived from archaeological reconstructions of these 20,000-year-old designs. Disaster relief organizations have adapted these techniques for emergency shelter construction in extreme environments. We lost the knowledge. Then we spent 100 years rediscovering it with modern science, and found out our ancestors had already solved it perfectly, with bones and stone tools. Go back to your thermostat. The number on it represents a temperature your ancestors would have considered miraculous, not because they couldn't achieve warmth. They could, and did, in conditions far more extreme than anything you'll ever face. But because achieving it cost them everything. Every warm night required weeks of preparation, months of planning, continuous physical labor, and an engineering knowledge so precise that a single mistake could mean a family frozen before dawn. The stories you tell your children at night are the direct descendants of the myths told by firelight in bone houses on a frozen steppe. You didn't invent warmth, you inherited it from the most ingenious engineers who ever lived, who had nothing but cold, time, and the refusal to die. The next time the cold comes and you reach for that thermostat without thinking, remember what it cost to get there, and understand for the first time how extraordinarily rare it is to be warm.